All right, everyone, we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Lindsay Barbeau, and I am facilitating this lovely session on behalf of WACAC, which is the Wisconsin Association for College Admissions Counseling, and behalf of StriveScan. Really quick before we kind of get started and I pass it off to our panelists, I just want to kind of make you aware of some of the features. You are probably all familiar with Zoom at this point, but there is a Q&A function at the very bottom of your screen. So we encourage you to submit those questions for our panelists so that we can kind of have an engaging and lively conversation. In addition, because this is a webinar format, your camera and microphones are all off, so we won't be able to see or hear you. So the only way to interact with our panelists is through that Q&A function. And then this session will run for about 45 minutes. And at the end, there will be a survey. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But we encourage you to sign up for additional sessions on wacac.com, which is where you signed up for this session initially. And then we will have recordings available of all of our sessions posted to our website in the near future, again, wacac.com. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our panelists who will be talking more about highly selective holistic admissions. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. So to get us started, we are 4 universities coming together to talk about highly selective holistic admission. So we'll just jump right into introductions. My name is Jenny Hunkin. I'm an assistant director of admissions at Johns Hopkins University. I'll allow my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Matt Green. I'm an assistant director of admissions at the University of Notre Dame, and I am the Wisconsin regional counselor. So if you have further questions or anything, I am the main contact for Notre Dame admissions.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Timothy Fields. I work at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. I am not the Wisconsin representative. I oversee the Midwest. My colleague, Ashley Bonds, is the contact, and we'll make sure you have her contact information. Happy to be with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hope Alchin. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions at Washington University in St. Louis. I'm a good person to contact if you have any questions about Wisconsin. And with that, I will turn it back over to Jenny. I
think we're actually turning it over to Tim to tell us what's important in
Tim,
a college.
Thank you. Thank you. So, let's kind of start with this process about, like, we were talking about highly selective colleges and what does that mean? And a lot of people think of those as just kind of the top 20, the Ivy Leagues and the most selective, but there are more selective schools. But as you begin to thinking about applying to these schools that have these high rankings, there are many things that you need to know, and we'll get into those things. So first thing you want to know, what is that school known for? So you don't want to apply to school just because of a name. You want to actually know, do they have the majors that they're looking for? Where are they located? What is the environment on the campus? What is the size of the campus? And so while, you often see, pre-pandemic on ESPN, you'll see Stanford, you'll see Duke, and they're great, schools with great reputations in academics, but you want to know what more is that. So if you're in Wisconsin and going to the West Coast and you don't want to be relatively close to home, that is something that you want to think about. So as you begin to think about these schools, please move beyond just the name to really think about, what will the school offer me? What will my experience be? And then ultimately, do they have the academic programs I am looking for? And also keep in mind that in a lot of instances, your major will change. So if you go to one of these schools and you apply for, the idea that I'm going to do this X academic plan, and then you get there and decide I want to do something else, do they have something else that you want to do? So those are things that you definitely want to keep in mind. And then, of course, we won't talk about it a lot in depth, but you want to think about what is the financial aid, what are the other scholarship opportunities that kind of go along with the college admission process that we'll talk about a little bit more as we go down the line. All right, so what does highly selective mean? What really highly selective means is that, and that only makes about a small amount of colleges and universities. Just for context, that there are over 4,000 college universities in the United States, and highly selective make up a very small amount of those college universities. So if you are looking at one of these schools, know that these schools only admit at a maximum of 2/3 of the applicants. Many of them admit significantly more. So I believe last year the admit rate for Stanford was somewhere around 3%. For Yale, it was somewhere around 8%. And then as you go up, most of these schools are going to admit less than 20% of the applicants, which means, and all of you are very bright, for every 100 students that apply, probably less than 20 are going to get in. And so in thinking about that, how do some of these schools determine who are these students going to be? And we've all received far more applications than we can actually admit. So, if I can just speak for Emory, last year we received 30,000 applications, and our incoming class was roughly over 1,300 people, and our admit rate was 14%. So yes, these are great schools with great reputations, but just know you are putting yourself in a very, very competitive applicant pool, and that in many instances, most students are not going to get in. And so if, we're not discouraging you from applying to these schools, but we just want you to know the realities as you go into these applicant pools, the competitive nature, and what, they are going to consist of. So now that we kind of have a context of what these schools, look like, the applicant pools, and, really thinking about, what are some of the reasons that we would want to apply to these schools beyond the name, we're going to really dive into what do we look at and how can you be admitted at some of these schools?
Yeah, so as Tim mentioned, we are, yes, we are highly selective, but part of being highly selective is that we're going to be taking a strong look at being holistic in our admissions process and our admissions review. So holistic essentially means well-rounded. We're going to be taking looks at students who are well-rounded in both academics and non-academic factors, and we'll go over those in a little bit. But one thing to keep in mind with holistic admissions, and all 4 of our institutions practice a holistic review process, is that the application that you present as a student applying is put into many contexts. That's context within the school, within the classes you even take, and what is provided to you maybe in your environment or in your overall school environment, whether that be clubs, but then also classes too. So with that being said, admissions decisions are not made on just one factor. We're going to be taking a strong look at many different factors that are going to be evenly weighted, and we'll go over those in a second too. And something to keep in mind as well is that there really truly is no magic formula or secret sauce when it comes to an admissions decision. There is really kind of no point trying to figure out what's the game here, what are we trying to do, trying to put forward some way to be able to get your foot in the door as a part of a game overall. There really is no formula or game. We really want students to bring themselves to a well-rounded application and be a well-rounded student. So with all of that in mind, we're going to be taking everything with the application into consideration so that it's an overall good match with who you are and who the university is you're applying to. There are so many different factors. There's classes and academics, there's social factors and clubs, as well as financial factors that we'll all get into those. But all of those have to line up for what a college is going to bring to you and you're going to bring to a university and its community. So we are truly building a community of students for all of our admissions processes. And we each have some unique factors, all of us, but again, we are going to all want to bring well-rounded students to our campuses. So with that, I mentioned all the components of the application, what we take a look at, we all pretty much weigh evenly. I want to go over those now. So some of those are the academic record. So that's grades and your overall curriculum. And then the rigor of academic classes is very important as well. We want to see how you're doing in the day-to-day operations of classes, how you're doing on tests and homework and how those things are going. But then also not just the grades and how you're doing, but are you getting really good grades in harder classes? So those rigorous classes of an AP level, IB level, maybe you're doing dual enrollment, something along those lines. We really want to see students who are going into rigorous courses and taking those classes and getting good grades in those. So academic rigor is going to be very important because all 4 of our institutions, as a part of being highly selective, is that a lot of times we understand that all 4 of our institutions have tougher academics. They're not, so challenging to the point where it's impossible, but we really value that strong academic rigor in our classes so that you can succeed at in the institutional classes and then beyond as well. So that's a main part of the academic side. Then we're going to be looking at standardized tests. We will explain a little bit later how the standardized test process is a little bit different this year. I won't give it away too much, but keep in mind a phrase test optional. That's going to be something that's very common. Again, we'll explain a little bit about that in a bit, but standardized tests in one way or the other are going to be a factor in all of our admissions decisions. And depending on, especially this year, depending on the severity of the factor, there is something that will probably change this year. Then we also evaluate recommendations, and each of us have different ways that we evaluate recommendations from maybe a teacher or other people outside your school or a counselor as well. Then extracurricular activities, and again, those could be a little bit different this year because extracurricular activities have looked different since March. So we will be taking that context into consideration, but it is true. We want to see how you're a leader, how you're developing yourself outside of the classroom. And then essays as well. Essays on the application vary between us. There might be some supplemental ones, the main personal statement on the application, but all of those truly help us to understand your own voice. It's one of the only ways that we see your own true voice in the application, and we very much value that, what kind of characteristics you would bring to our institutions. And then finally, interviews could be a part of the admissions process. That it varies between all of our institutions, but that is something to keep in mind there. So all of these factors are weighed evenly. That is what we want to stress with this, is that they're all different, but they all come together to form the well-rounded and holistic review of your applications.
Apologies. Okay, so they all come together to help us understand who you are and how you might look in our community. But even within our different institutions that all have that holistic admissions review philosophy, there are slight differences in what we might require or how that might look. So we do suggest that maybe you keep some sort of spreadsheet, keep yourself organized during this process, as there will be a lot of nuances within the process. But that holistic admissions philosophy is definitely consistent across our different institutions. So something that Matt previewed was test optional. So for this coming year, all of our schools are test optional, which means that you can choose to submit your scores for the ACT or SAT, or choose not to submit your scores for the ACT or SAT, and your application will be complete. You are not at an advantage or a disadvantage if you choose to submit or not to submit. It's really up to you on if you are satisfied with your scores and feel that they represent your academic abilities. We know there's many challenges with testing site closures due to the pandemic, and so we want you to be able to make the decision that's best for you, keep yourself healthy. So that is an update that our schools all have, but you should definitely check out among many different schools this year and see what those different policies are. And then interviews was mentioned as well. You can see there's slightly different policies here. So that's, again, something you'll want to look at to see what each school is requiring so that you can find those different ways to tell your story and represent yourself throughout this holistic admissions review. So that part that we were talking about for holistic admissions review, you're finding a match with the university, and the university is also finding a match with what students they want to bring in to their student communities. So as admissions offices, we're considering questions when we're reading your application about your academics, thinking about you within our context. Not just are you a great student, but will you thrive as a student in our community? How will you thrive and contribute to our campus life? Our students aren't just there to go to class, but to really learn from one another, to collaborate, to find new ways of connecting. And then also, how are you really going to take advantage of various opportunities, both inside and outside the classroom? And what perspective might you be sharing with our campus community? We're really thinking about you and all those different application components, but through the lens of our university. How is that going to look in our environment? So definitely something you should think about as you're working to craft your application, but also something we're very intentionally thinking about on our end while reading your applications. So now to sort of get you in that mindset of what are different types of campus communities that you might see and be thinking about, we're each going to share about 2 minutes about our universities to just give you a quick snapshot of who we are and what are some things that might stand out for you to think about if you could be that strong match with our community.
Yes, thank you. So usually we go in traditional NUI order. So naturally I will kick it off here. So the University of Notre Dame, we were founded in 1842 by Father Edward Sorin, who is the man with this quote right here. And we have been in existence now for a little bit over 175 years. And our main goal at Notre Dame is to continue the legacy of Father Sorin and the Holy Cross Priests, the Holy Cross Congregation, which is the Roman Catholic religious order that founded the university and has run it from day one until now and will into the future. We want to take what Father Sorin brought to Notre Dame and the Congregation of Holy Cross, where we want to educate students' minds, but not at the expense of their hearts. So we want to have them be a force for good in the world. And really, like Father Edward Sorin said, to do the most good in this country. And I think all 4 of our institutions have a lot of that, even if it might not be those specific words, a lot of that mantra that comes to mind when you think of all 4 of us. But we really are going to educate the minds of our students as well as their hearts. So we want to take that into consideration, and that's whether you are coming from a Roman Catholic background or not. We still have about 20% of our students that are not Roman Catholic, but they bring a community sense to Notre Dame. We want students who are going to help others, are going to put themselves and others, are going to be working to bring both of those groups together, and really just being collaborative in academics as well as in the spirit of Notre Dame. So we have all of those factors that come together at the University of Notre Dame, and it really truly does bring a sense of strong community. That's one thing. We are we're not in a city, as you can see. We're more of a residential campus. You do see the city of South Bend just in the background of this picture, but we really are truly a residential campus. And if you want to have that experience where you're connected in residence halls, our residence hall system, as well as having a strong culture in clubs, but in sports, that also brings to the table overall what we have for educating the mind and the heart of students.
All right, so I'm going to talk just for a minute about WashU in St. Louis. The thing to note about WashU is that we are both a Tier 1 research institution as well as a liberal arts institution. And I'm going to try to distill things down to kind of 3 main takeaways for WashU to think about later. I think the first one would be that we are known for having a very interdisciplinary academic experience. At WashU, we do have 5 academic divisions, and you will apply into one of those as a senior in high school. So this is going to be our College of Arts and Sciences, our McKelvey School of Engineering, our Olin Business School, or our Sandfox School of Design and Visual Arts, which is home to both architecture and art on our campus. So you may think, oh no, I have to choose just one thing, and we really want to make sure we're breaking down that assumption. At WashU, about 80% of our students will graduate with at least some dual program. So either a major and a minor, a major and 2 minors, a double major, and there is no restriction about majoring, minoring across schools or taking classes across schools at WashU. So we hope that you see this experience at WashU as a way of really bringing your interests together, and are always really excited to have students who have these really disparate interests and see the ways that they can be connected on our campus. Of course, aside from our wonderful campus, I do want to talk a bit about, for my second point, our community. At WashU, like all 4 institutions we have here, we really value the diverse communities that we have. And it's hard to distill this down into just a few words. But WashU's community comes from all over the country and all over the world. And we are particularly bringing students who are interested in interacting with peers who are a little bit different from them, but also the same. We're a very collaborative campus, a very friendly and welcoming campus. I think it comes from those Midwestern roots that many of you are familiar with. It's definitely alive and well on WashU's campus. We do have a very residential campus as well, although we'll get to the city of St. Louis in a minute. And I think one testament of that is that 80% of our students will live in WashU campus housing, either on or off campus through their time at WashU for all 4 years. So most students are staying in WashU's campus housing. At some point, we do have the best housing in the country. So we'd like to brag about our Tempur-Pedic mattresses a lot, but it is a really great thing about WashU. The last thing I'll talk about is St. Louis. And as you can tell from just our name, St. Louis is a huge part of WashU's identity, and it is right at our doorstep. St. Louis is a really thriving metropolitan area, but I think one of my favorite parts about it is that it's super accessible. You definitely do not need a car to get around St. Louis. We have an awesome public transportation system that is free for WashU students. It's also an incredibly affordable city. There are so many free museums. We actually have more free cultural attractions than any other city in the United States other than Washington, D.C. So there's a ton to do, a really great food scene, and I highly recommend that you explore the city that we're lucky to be in. The last thing I'll quickly mention before we move on is that while there's some big adjustments to our application process, like the test optional decision, we do have a smaller adjustment. For the first time, WashU is allowing students to upload a 90-second video as part of their application. And so if you want to add more of yourself to that application, I highly encourage you to do that. There's no restrictions, be creative, and we're excited to meet you. Great. At this point, I'll turn it over to Jenny.
Great. So Johns Hopkins is a mid-sized community, about 5,300 undergraduate students on our Homewood campus in the northern part of the city of Baltimore. So parts I would like to focus on are sort of the collaborative innovation that comes through our students and through the Hopkins community. And also that our students are really crossing educational boundaries, really stepping outside the box during their time at Hopkins. So Hopkins is US's first research university. We're also the school that spends the most on research of any school in the US. This past year, we spent $2.56 billion on research. So it's very much happening in abundance. And that spirit of innovation is really key to the Hopkins identity, where our students are excited to ask the questions that no one else has asked yet and to find the answers that were seen as unanswerable. And so that comes through a very open, flexible curriculum where students are bringing together different disciplines. 60% of our students have a double major or a major and a minor, and you're able to start off right away if you know what you want to study, but also to find how does that connect. If you love chemistry, how does archaeology fit into that, and where are those overlaps and intersections? But our students are really motivated to learn by doing and asking those questions. So 97% of our students will have some sort of pre-professional experience through research, internships, and really get into what they want to be studying, whether they're collaborating across the Hopkins network, like the Bloomberg School of Public Health, or the School of Medicine, or School of Advanced International Studies, or they're the ones who are asking the questions and being that primary investigator, finding out what they want to know. So really coming together across the Hopkins network with their peers. It's a very cohesive and collaborative environment, but also students aren't afraid to step outside the box and really bring their full selves to the Hopkins experience. One student I know is a physics major with minors in visual arts and space sciences, and she does physics research on campus, but she also is the editor-in-chief of our fashion magazine on campus. So you really get to have all different interests and ideas come together during your Hopkins experience. So now I'll turn it over to Tim.
Thank you. Yes, we are Emory University, located in Atlanta, Georgia. However, we have two undergraduate campuses. So if you're not familiar with Emory, we have both the Emory College, which is the campus you see right here, which is roughly about 15 minutes outside of downtown Atlanta. But then we have the original founding campus of Emory, Oxford, which is 45 minutes to the east. That campus is smaller, has 900 students. If a student wants to begin at that campus, they can spend their first 2 years on the Oxford campus and automatically transition to the Atlanta campus, or students can come directly to the Atlanta campus. It is completely their choice. You can apply to Emory College, Oxford College, or both. If you apply to both places, you'll get an answer from both places, and you can determine where you want to begin. The only difference between the two schools is size and location. Some of you may want to start at a smaller school, so Oxford provides that option to have a very small, close-knit liberal arts experience, or some of you want to attend a mid-sized institution similar to my colleagues, and that's Emory College, which has 5,500 students. So you do have those choices. We have over 80 different academic areas. Many students come interested in the healthcare sciences and business, but we also want to highlight our great humanities programs, fine arts, and social sciences. Our English and creative writing programs is one of the top in the country. The director of that program just received an award, a Pulitzer Prize in poetry for his work, Jericho Brown. And then we have many other faculty across the disciplines who are doing great work. But one of the parts that we really want to highlight as part of the Emory experience is the city of Atlanta and all that Atlanta has to offer, being number 3 as far as Fortune 500 companies, being a leader in the civil rights movement, and also being one of the top cities as far as startup companies and also nonprofits. Atlanta is a leader as far as film and media production. It actually is the #1 city for film production in this past year. So yes, we want you to enjoy all that Emory has to offer, but the city of Atlanta also provides a great backdrop for not only professional opportunities, but numerous social and extracurricular activities as well. The final thing that, I'll say about, Emory is that roughly about 70% of students stay on campus for all 4 years. So we want you to feel, if you want to be on campus, you can, but you also have the opportunity to, explore Atlanta. And then also about 1/3 of our students participate in Greek life. So if students are interested in participating in Greek life, you have those opportunities as well. With that, I think we are going to open it up for questions.
So before we open up to questions, although if you do have questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box below. Each of us are happy to answer questions either about our own specific institutions or more broadly about highly selective admissions. So feel free to ask us anything. Before we do that though, I do want to touch on just a few more pieces of the application and college search process that can be really important for students, and specifically locating those in the highly selective landscape. The first thing that is really important for many, many students is financial aid. I will say that our group of universities here does offer both need-based as well as merit-based aid, but our merit scholarship opportunities are usually quite small compared to the incredible commitment we have to need-based financial aid. So at all 4 of our institutions, we are going to meet 100% of demonstrated need. And so what this means essentially is that you may look at a college and see the sticker price and be a little intimidated by that sticker price and be like, whoa, that is a lot of money. I don't think that's going to be doable for my family. And we want to make sure that you are looking at that sticker price, but also knowing what that sticker price means. So the sticker price would be what someone would pay without any piece of financial aid. So no financial assistance from the university. But for many of our students and many of our schools, many of our students will have some financial assistance. And we are going to meet that commitment to 100% of demonstrated need, which essentially means that when you fill out your financial aid documents, so the FAFSA, perhaps the CSS profile for schools, they're going to come up with a number that's your estimated family contribution. And so you're going to take that sticker price you see, and the estimated family contribution is what our institutions would expect your family to contribute. So if you take that big number, the sticker price, you subtract out your estimated family contribution, the rest of what's left is considered that demonstrated need. And at all 4 of our institutions, we will cover 100% of that. That is a pretty tremendous commitment and something that all 4 of us are extremely proud of. There are several other institutions in the United States that are able to make this commitment as well. Financial aid is really important for you. We encourage you to see what that price that's unique to you would look like. And the best way to do that is by going to our financial aid websites. Every college in America is required to have something called the net price calculator on their website. It is based off of the FAFSA and will allow you to get an estimate as to what your need-based financial aid package would be, so you know what that college may cost you. They're normally pretty accurate. I will say they're only as accurate as the information that you put into the net price calculator. So make sure you're actually talking to your parents' guardians if you're not 100% sure what those numbers may be, just so that you can be having a really accurate sense. We also use tools like My Intuition. It's another one that's only a few minutes to fill out, so please make sure you're taking those steps. The last thing that I want to talk about is the different ways that you can apply into our universities. And it can get a little bit confusing, but you can see our different plans that you have right here. I do want to acknowledge that several of us are also QuestBridge partners. And so the QuestBridge application process is a little bit different. So questions about QuestBridge, we are happy to answer those, but they're not going to fit into this framework that we're looking at right here. That being said, I think the vocabulary that's most difficult to break down is kind of those early rounds. So there's a few different ways of looking at things. The main distinction is early decision versus early action. So for students who have a front runner, let's call it a college that they're really excited about, they may be considering these early options. For an early action school, this means that you think this college is your first choice and you want the college to know that, and you're submitting your application earlier to let them know that. It's not binding, it's simply you submitting your application early to say, hey, I'm really, really interested. You were my first choice institution, or maybe in my top few choices for an institution. You're applying to a school that has restrictive early actions. You can see that Notre Dame is a school with restrictive early action. This means that you are not allowed to apply to another school in an early round. There are some exceptions. You can still fill out scholarship applications or things like that if you're looking at a local state school that requires that, but you wouldn't be able to fill out 2 restrictive early action schools in that early action application cycle. So you'd have to pick one. Similarly, early decision is even stronger commitment. An early decision application is a binding application. It means that if a school with early decision, like WashU, like Emory, like Johns Hopkins, admits you, you are going to come in the fall. This is super exciting if WashU, Johns Hopkins, Emory, whoever it is your number one choice. It's terrifying if we are not. So please make sure that you are really thinking about, is this a school that I'm ready to say yes to if they say yes to me? And if you're like, absolutely, early decision could be an awesome option for you. Make sure you investigate that financial piece before you apply early decision, because it is, again, a binding decision. Early decision 1, early decision 2 just happen at different points of the year. Early decision 1, as you can see for us, the November 1st for all across the board, whereas early decision 2 happens along with our regular decision. Regular decision is not binding, so it is when most of our applicants for all 4 of our schools are coming in is the regular decision round. So if you're not really sure and we're on your list, but you don't know where we are on your list, that's okay. It's where most of our applicants will come from, and we're always excited to see our RD students as well. You can see a bit about our financial aid information. It's pretty similar for all 4 of us down below. If you do have questions about merit aid, we're happy to talk about them. But right now, we're going to switch over to questions. Again, the Q&A box is going to be below, and you're happy to answer things. But I'm going to kick us off here by asking a little bit more about holistic review. So we had a question that with all of us being test optional this year, what other factors maybe we'd be relying more heavily on in the absence of those standardized test scores? And I don't know if anyone wants to take that off the bat.
I'll jump in here. As we stated, all of us do holistic review. We look at all the information that you're going to submit on your application. And in this upcoming cycle, of course, test optional, which completely you have the choice on if you have test scores to submit. If you don't submit test scores, you will be disadvantaged at no point in time. Also, we want you to understand that we understand some of your schools have gone past fail. Some of your grading, scales have changed. We recognize all those things, and we're going to look at those in the context of your school. With that being said, I think, this year is going to be very important to differentiate yourself through your essays. Your voice has always been an important place of the application, but especially during this year, we truly want to know who you are, how you're going to fit into this community, and then also just, what has been going on in your life over the past 9 to 12 months. So all these information is going to be very important. And so definitely be very thoughtful about what you share in your essays. I always, try and tell students, share something that we have not otherwise found out in your application. So if you are a great athlete and you participated in athletics all your life and you are a great star, we're going to see that in your extracurricular activities. It's probably going to be highlighted in your letters of recommendation. I would encourage you to write about something outside of sports to give us a better sense of all the parts of you and not just those one particular aspect.
I think you can also add into thinking about how we review applications. Remember when Matt was talking about the holistic review process? We've never relied solely on numbers for any of our application processes, and therefore this is just another way of looking at a contextual review. And at WashU, we have always preferenced the transcript over testing. We think it's a more accurate indicator of a student's success in college. Because of that, we will continue to preference the transcript, even for students who submit standardized testing. And we'll be looking at all the factors that we have. I can't emphasize enough Tim's response about essays, but in particular, letters of recommendation, I think, are a great place for students to shine this year, to be picking, perhaps you didn't take testing and you're applying into a STEM program. And you're like, okay, I want them to know that I'm really, really great at math and science. Maybe pick a STEM teacher to write your letter of recommendation just to give us that extra boost in that area where testing may not be able to enhance that piece of your application. I think we're going to stay with the testing theme just for a little while longer, because I know that's where a lot of questions are lying. And I think one important piece here is a student asks, is it going to be more difficult to receive a merit scholarship if you do not submit your standardized test scores? Does anyone on the panel want to start with that question?
Sure. So for merit scholarships, those are also selected through a holistic admissions review. So it's not a formula. If you have this test score, you're going to get this much merit scholarship. They're very similar to everything we laid out for how we're reviewing your application. That's how a merit scholarship is also decided. Those students who are really standing out in some way are going to receive those merit scholarships at our schools. And if anyone has a different caveat, definitely throw that in. But I think that's fairly similar, that it is this very holistic approach. And so you're not going to be disadvantaged for a merit scholarship if you're not able to submit a ACT or SAT test score.
And one last question about testing here, perhaps not last, but one more for right now, is thinking about those other pieces of testing that that a student may have, AB test, SAT subject test. How are those considered in the process, and do we recommend that students submit those scores this year if they have them?
Yeah, I can take that. As we showed in the chart a little bit ago, we do not require SAT subject tests, and at least for us in Notre Dame, and I believe it's similar for everyone else, we are not requiring any really other tests. We're, especially with us being test optional this year, we're not requiring any tests. And a main reason for that is we really want to focus on the day-to-day life of what you bring forth in your classes, as I was mentioning a little bit about holistic review in the academics. So it's not required, especially for SAT subject tests. We are not requiring them. So don't feel like you need to submit them for us, because we really don't need them. If another school would require them that you're applying to and you need to send those in, go ahead. And if you want to send them to us, great, but don't go out of your way to send them to our four institutions.
Our next question is, when a student is applying, if they are applying undecided or having an undeclared major, will that affect their application in the admissions process?
So speaking for Emory, a lot of students, if not most students, apply undeclared, and that's perfectly fine. I think all of us, pride ourselves on being liberal arts colleges, and so we want to encourage that exploration. So, some of us have specific schools and various things that you may have to apply to, and each of us can speak to that individually. But, without those, with those being the exceptions, I think, all of us want students to come in with an open mind. We have several different academic areas that we offer. We want students to take those classes, but maybe they're curious about to, pursue interests, maybe in music or the arts or something that they maybe don't want to major in, but they want to, nurture those passions. And so, yes, it's perfectly fine to come in undecided, especially if you're considering liberal arts schools.
I would also add, since WashU admits by division, we get this question a lot, right? If you're undecided, how will you possibly find out where you're supposed to be at WashU if you're being admitted into a division? And I want to reassure you that it's okay not to know, and we admit students who are undecided into all 5 of our divisions. I will say, I always tell students that if you had to, pick right now and make a guess as to what your major was going to be at the end of college. And, you know, maybe you get a gift card if you win, and, you know, maybe you get a nice handshake if it's a different major, and that's okay. But whatever that major is, that's the school you should be applying into. And that's where you should, you know, submit your application to WashU, but know that there's room to transfer between these divisions, to have second majors across them. And it's not a binding decision at any of our schools, the major that you put down on your application. So it's important to know it's a guess. And I would say that for many students who do come in having said that they were going to be XYZ major, many of them change their minds, and that's okay. And students grow in college. And so I think we're all a little bit undecided when we enter college anyway, even if some of us put that in our applications and some of us don't. But excellent question here. Can we perhaps talk a little bit about the transfer application process and how this may differ from the application process we described, and probably a little bit about the selectivity of our transfer pools as well? Tim, I see you nodding. Did you want to take this one?
Yes. So I guess the first thing is, you know, the transfer process, kind of given the current cycle, you know, at each our institutions with the, you know, many unknowns this upcoming year, it may be, you know, shift a little bit. But for the most part, the transfer process is a lot more straightforward than the holistic review process that we, you know, discussed. You know, I've coordinated transfer admission at Emory for years. And, you know, really what we're looking for is, were you successful academically at the previous institution? And if you did well academically, had a solid GPA, took some rigorous courses, and, you know, there were no disciplinary problems or anything like that, usually the transfer process would go smoothly for you. You know, yes, if you did some extracurriculars, we're going to look at those. You have to have faculty recommendation, but it is really, really, really driven by what classes did you take in college and what GPA did you have. Now, with that being said, you know, many schools don't have a lot of any money for transfer scholarships. So if you're transferring, you'll really be heavily dependent upon financial aid if you need that. Also, there's only many schools only admit transfers once a year. So you're gonna be limited on the time in which you can apply to be a transfer. And then, you know, most of us have relatively small transfer classes. And so for this year, we had, you know, we only accepted 150 transfers to come in, and that was only for our fall term. So yes, it's going to be a straightforward process. It's heavily going to be driven by the academics and the courses you've taken, you know, in college. And in most instances, you're going to have at least a year of college. Not many schools are going to say, oh, I'm going to go to school one semester, have 15 or so hours, and then I'm going to transfer. They're going to really want you to have a solid year under your belt, but it varies. And you're going to have to, you know, reach out to individual schools to find out their policies, because all of us differ a little bit as far as the transfer policies, whereas there's a lot of consistency in the first year process.
Thank you, Tim. And I think this is going to be a really great question to end on. A question about what is some of our advice for students who are applying to college this year?
My advice for students is to always really think about the holistic admissions process as a really great advantage for you. You get to know, we're going to read all the parts of your application, and so you get to craft a narrative within that, knowing we're going to learn about you in all these different ways, and we're going to consider all of the pieces of information. So think about, Tim was saying this earlier, don't tell us something over and over and over again, but tell us something new in all of these different parts. So if you have done your activities list, think about what did the admissions committee might learn from that, and how can I complement that and add something new through my personal statement. If there's a supplemental essay, how can you add something new there? So think about this as one cohesive narrative and really assess what have they learned about me and what is missing that's really essential to know to understand me as a person and what I'm all about. So really think about this as one cohesive narrative.
Thank you, Jenny. And at this point, we're unfortunately running out of time. So if there are questions that we didn't get to answer, we are happy to follow up via email at another point. You can see contact information for all of us on this slide right here, as well as if you go to our individual websites, you can find contact information for some of us as well. So we look forward to interacting with you in the future. We wish you the best of luck in this application cycle. And if you have any questions, we're always here. With that, I hope you enjoy your night, and we're so happy to have talked to you.
Thank you. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Well, welcome back, and what a great presentation. And really quick, just going to share my screen. Just wanted to say thank you on behalf of WACAC and StriveScan to our panelists, but also for you all joining us. Once you close out of the webinar here, you will get a quick 4-question survey that we encourage you to submit so that we can continue to improve these awesome events. And then just a reminder from before that if you would like to sign up for more sessions or eventually see those recordings, you can find both of those on the WACAC website, which is wacac.com. Otherwise, stay safe, stay healthy, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.